Chapter 95. After Marcos finished hugging his mother, as well as the housemaids, he turned over his shoulder, gesturing for me to come over to him. His mother finally glanced at me, and while dabbing her tears with her handkerchief, she walked over to me and kissed both of my cheeks, embracing me tightly. Any anxiety I had harbored up until that moment about her all but vanished. She welcomed me with open arms. "Bonnet, meet my mother Estella," Marcos said happily. "Welcome, Bonnet," she smiled politely, taking my arm and walking me through the majesty of the mezzanine that fell out over remarkable views of a dark ocean. "Thank you, Estella. How was your trip?" she asked, her thick Spanish accent seeping through her words. "It was very nice, thank you. Marcos had been telling me all about you this morning," she began. "He said you'll make him the happiest man on earth." I laughed, feeling my cheeks beginning to blush. "He makes me very happy also. All a mother wants is for her child to be happy." She turned to me, her dark glassy eyes rimmed with a slight smudge of kohl. "Money can only give so much, and for this I embrace you like my daughter." She nodded, clutching my arm. How April didn't get along with this woman was beyond me. She was the sweetest lady, but now knowing April, I totally got it. Marcos, Estella, and I descended into a stunning, entertaining area, scattered with lounge chairs and coffee tables, in between towering palms planted in some stone urns. I glimpsed two women who were sitting at a table, appearing as if they were about to eat dinner. They quickly heard the commotion of our entourage arriving and glimpsed Marcos. Their calm faces immediately became astonished, and they quickly staggered out of their seats, clamoring toward him, screaming out of their minds until they eventually burst into tears. And just like Estella, these women too collapsed into Marcos's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I mean, they really, really loved him. The thing I quickly learned about Colombian people is that they don't at all hide their emotions, or at least they didn't with Marcos, and it was refreshingly beautiful to see. "Bonnet," Marcos said, holding the women in his arms. "Meet my two sisters, Luciana and Valeria." "Hello," I said, smiling at their streaming faces. Two startled men coming in from outside walked up to us, also in total shock. Marcos glanced over his shoulder. "And this is Valeria's husband, Nicolas," he said, pointing, "and my older brother, Alejandro." Through their tears, his sisters kissed and hugged me like they knew me forever, as did Alejandro and Nicolas. I was seriously touched. After the initial shockwave that had hit the Almeida family, we gradually all sat down. Cumbia music began to fill the sultry night air, cascading over the mezzanine and floating out into the lush garden terraces. And within the span of an hour, another 30 or so people arrived at the home, all sharing the same reaction that everyone else experienced. And it wasn't before long that a massive party ensued. The poor maids were run off their feet, busily cooking up crazy amounts of food, feeding our famished stomachs of fried snapper and coconut rice, along with copious amounts of beans and potatoes. And if that wasn't enough, someone started pouring ronvello and aguardiente, a drink that I would never forget too easily. "Bonnet, come and sit with us." Luciana and Valeria smiled, taking my hand. "Tell us about America." Marcos' sisters dragged me away from him, taking me over to a group of women that had formed around the table. I would periodically glance over my shoulder at Marcos, sitting with all the men, including Lucas and Philippe. appearing completely relaxed and happy, smoking Cuban cigars. I knew we were all in for a big night. Chapter 96. After being charged up with more than enough alcohol, people began rising to their feet, getting carried away by the rhythm of the music. The men took the women and pulled them close, filling the entertaining area with some beautiful Latin dancing that flowed out onto the garden terrace. And just as expected, Marcus came over to me with a sly smirk plastered across his face. I knew what that meant. "Come, my baby," he smiled, taking my hand, planting his lips on mine as we rocked back and forth. We stared into each other's eyes. "How do you like my family?" he murmured. "I love your family." Kissing him again, I smiled, kissing him again. "They are the sweetest people. I'm so glad we came." Marcus smiled. "They're your family too now." We continued dancing throughout the ungodly hours of the early morning until people finally started disappearing, making their way home or dragging themselves to bed in various rooms all over the property. And admittedly, that Colombian liquor had quickly gone to my head. Whether it was jet lag or that I was actually drunk, I couldn't tell. But after 2 nights of consecutive drinking in foreign countries and traveling more than 9,000 miles, I could barely keep my eyes open. I was fucking wrecked. Marcus dragged me to his wing of the house that overlooked the ocean, the lights of Santa Marta to our left, and the wildly rich mountains of Parque Tayrona and Taganga to our right. I don't remember too much after that, but I know that I woke up the next day feeling like death. And for the first time ever, Marcus wasn't doing too well either. Yet despite our self-inflicted sickness, it was also the first time that I really saw Marcus relaxed. He slept the whole night. And as I stirred, he quickly rolled over onto me, wanting to go back to sleep. He didn't want to do anything. He didn't even check his cell phone. He was home. Nothing else mattered. After an hour of negotiating, the two of us finally staggered down the winding stairs through the gardens and onto the main garden terrace that gave way to majestic views of the ocean. It was then that I really got a glimpse into the opulence of the family home. It was paradise. "Good afternoon!" everyone cried, watching us stumbling down the stairs together. "Oh my gosh, what time is it?" I muttered to Marcos. 2 p.m. I was disgusted. "We thought you would sleep all day," Valeria bellowed, smiling at us from the long outdoor table, lined with white sun umbrellas. I laughed, holding my embarrassed face in my hands. My body clock was totally out of whack. "How did you sleep?" Estella asked, her face shaded under a wide-brimmed hat, looking incredibly chic. "Too good, Mama," Marcus muttered through his heavy eyelids, kissing her forehead and sitting down beside her. The house chef had prepared a spectacular lunch, sprawled along the table, and we sat there feeding our wretched hangovers, talking and laughing amongst ourselves, watching Valeria's children play in the pool. It was bliss. "Now this is a good chance for everyone to practice their English," Valeria cried over the table. "Bonet doesn't speak Spanish, even though she is half Spanish." Everyone laughed. They were the nicest, warm-hearted family. And as I ate with them, I could see where Marcus got his passion from. Simply put, they were just stunningly beautiful human beings. And the more I sat with them, the more I could distinguish the differences between them and April. Chapter 97. Throughout the afternoon, many people came by the house to visit Marcos, but some of them stood out in particular. There was a small group of men that came by, walking along the terrace beside the pool with Marcos, chaperoned by Lucas and Philippe. I glanced up at these men, 2 of them Western-looking and the other 2 Colombian, and they had come to talk business with Marcos. And about a half an hour later, another man, a sharp-dressed American man, with his own very obvious security detail, walked into the mezzanine. This polite-looking man turned out to be Vince Capolton, the United States ambassador to Colombia. "Good afternoon," he said, waving to everyone at the table. Marcos, looking finer than ever, clad in white linen trousers and a white shirt, excused himself from the other gentlemen and went to shake the ambassador's hand. "Good afternoon, Vince," Marcos smiled, giving him a firm handshake. "Welcome." The 2 of them, along with the other gentlemen, briskly made their way inside the house, and all of our curious eyes at the table followed them as they went. "Ah, Bonet, how do you like Colombia so far?" Luciana asked, a beautiful, voluptuous woman who was just as elegant as her mother. She had those same dark, haunting eyes like Marcos. I shook my head happily. "I am having the time of my life," I smiled. "I don't think I can drink any more of that aguardiente for another lifetime, however." Everyone laughed. "It's a drink with 2 faces," Estella chuckled, picking at some of her mangosteen. "You'll have to watch it." "Tell us how America is, Bon?" Valeria asked bittersweetly, toweling off her daughter Sophia. "How is our baby Henry?" "Oh, Henry is lovely," I said, but growing up very quickly. "And he's addicted to his iPad." "Ah, he's a teenager," Luciana answered. "This is what they do. Better than their drugs and alcohol. And girls." "I agree," I nodded. "And April?" Valeria asked carefully, the mood slightly shifting around the table. April's fine," I said cordially with a mere smile. They could sense I was being polite, for they knew of all people how April was. I noticed Estella breathing deeply out of her nose, like she was going to make an announcement. Oh no. "Bonet, we are women," Estella began with a lowered voice, "and I know my beloved son loves you. This to me is obvious as his mother. And although I don't agree with the way that things happen between you and Marcos, your love for each other is very clear to us." She paused as she glanced at the women around the table, whom were nodding in agreement. "My daughters and my family at the table this afternoon all agree that we have never seen our Marcos this happy." I felt myself swell upon hearing her approval. "Thank you. None of us went looking for this, Estella," I said quietly. I had absolutely no idea of this coming. How could anyone? And I fought with it for so long, and I know Marcos did too. But everything felt so right, despite appearing to be so wrong. I muttered, putting my head down. "I can't explain it. And believe me, I've seen April's scary side. She's not a woman to take anything like this lightly." Don't we know?" Estella sighed apprehensively, twitching her eyebrows. "She's really made no effort to be a part of our family, which deeply saddens us. But she is an Americano. We cannot expect too much. But we worry for our baby Henry." "Oh, you must come and stay with us in America," I said. "I'd love for you to come, and I know Henry would too. You'll see he's growing up fast." Suddenly we glimpsed Marcos shaking the hand of Vince, walking him out the mezzanine toward the entrance of the home. He came back down to us on the terrace minutes later, pulling up his seat beside his mother, and glanced at me affectionately. "That was the American ambassador for Colombia," he said, smiling at me. He's invited us to a banquet held by Louis Vermento tonight. Ooh, Estella murmured inquisitively. Who is Louis Vermento? I asked curiously. He's a real estate developer, Marcos said. And probably the richest man in Colombia? Valeria whispered into my ear, touching my arm. Oh, I see. A light bulb went off in my head. Oh, shit. My clothes. I had none, except for the Gucci dress shoved in my bag. I gave Marcus a pleading face. What? He asked. I have no clothes, I cried, shrugging my shoulders. Well, what a reaction Marcus received. All the women around the table started crying out contemptuously at Marcos, while the men sat back in their chairs laughing, puffing on their cigars. Brother, how do you bring your lady here with no clothes? Luciana mockingly bellowed. Everyone erupted into laughter. It was hilarious. I gave Marcus a sharp, sneering glance. Ah, so now I know, Valeria laughed as she surmised. This is the reason why Bonet was meant to come to Colombia, to wear a Colombian dress. Marcus rolled his eyes at his sisters. All these women at the table are crazy for clothes, he said, looking at me. Just like you. Aren't we all? I defended. This is in the DNA of a woman, honey. I have just the dress for Bonet, Valeria said, clapping her hands over the rambunctious banter. The red Pasquale. The women gasped excitedly. Oh, that'll be perfect, Estella murmured, nodding at me with absolute approval. It'll look stunning on her. What is this red Pasquale dress? I wondered. You'll see, my dear. Valeria winked at me. I haven't been able to fit in it for over 10 years, but it'll fit you perfectly. Chapter 98. Later in the early evening, I got out of the shower and heard a knock at the door. Come in, I cried from inside the bathroom, quickly slipping into a robe. Estella, along with Luciana and Valeria, entered the room. Are you ready to meet the Pasquale, my dear? Estella asked. I smiled at her. Yes, I am. Then come with us, she said, clasping her hand within mine. Up another flight of stairs, the three of us entered a master suite, which I am assuming was Estella's, due to the sheer decadence of the room. My awe was quickly distracted, however, by the jaw-dropping ruby red dress that was being adjusted by one of the maids on a dress form. It was an arrestingly breathtaking dress. Backless, sleeveless, beaded with the most intricate detail that I hadn't seen on a dress in a very long time. It was to die for, and probably the sexiest dress I've ever seen. The Pasquale, Valeria said, running her hand along the beaded shoulder, allowing me to become engrossed within its magnificence. Oh, Valeria, I gasped, admiring the button embroidery that began at the tailbone and draped all the way to the floor. It's stunning. I have no words. Where did you find a dress like this? Elie Saab made it for my engagement to Nicholas. Of course he did. Come, Bonet, Luciana said, taking my hand. Let us see it on. I slipped out of my robe, wearing but only a pair of nude-colored lace panties, and watched as Marcus's mother and sisters fit me into this Pasquale. And after several delicate minutes, I stood in front of the floor-length mirror, mesmerized. The dress was a work of art, and surprisingly, it fit me flawlessly. I glimpsed the faces of Luciana and Valeria, clutching their chests in the mirror's reflection. Bonet, Luciana gasped, gently putting her hands on my shoulders. Marcus will marry you if he sees you in this dress. Everyone giggled. I hope so, I grinned. Valeria came and stood beside me, running her hand down my arm affectionately. We'll fix your hair for you. I felt like the luckiest woman for the next hour and a half, sitting at Estella's expansive makeup vanity as Valeria styled my hair. And she did big hair, big on top, big at the sides, finishing with long wavy curls. My favorite style anyway. We always like to do things big in Colombia. Valeria smirked, busily putting the final touches on my hair, dousing the final look with almost a full can of hairspray. You should have seen my wedding. I can only imagine, I smiled, doing my own makeup, settling for a classic red lip, long lashes and dark eyes. Very seductive. Estella came out of her closet and walked toward me with a box. I turned over my shoulder. Oh no, something scary inside. That box looked dangerous. The Grizzagona was embossed across it. The air escaped my lungs. My darling, Estella purred, you cannot wear the Pasquale without the jewels. Honor me by wearing these. She opened the box to reveal an exquisite pear-shaped diamond necklace with pear-shaped diamond earrings to match. Oh my goodness, I gasped, becoming lost within their brilliance under the bright lights of a chandelier. Valeria held the mass of my curled black hair in her hands and allowed Luciana to clasp the diamonds around my neck and through my ears. I stood back in the mirror again and searched hard for Bunny. I couldn't find her, but someone else had taken her place in the reflection. Estella took my hands and stood beside me in the mirror, her dark eyes observing me, just like Marcos did. Tan hermosa Bonet. She sighed deeply, not taking her eyes from me. You will be the most beautiful woman at the party tonight. You look like a Colombian princess. She squeezed my hand, with tears welling in her eyes. If only my Pablo see you. I glanced at her sympathetically, and then glanced at Valeria and Luciana, also wiping their eyes of tears. You're so beautiful, Valeria whispered, sniffling in my ear as she embraced me tightly. I felt that ugly lump press painfully against my throat. Please don't make me cry now, I muttered. Okay, stop everyone, she chuckled, blowing her nose. We don't want to spoil Bonet. I loved these women. I can't believe how easily they had opened their hearts to me. Muchas gracias, I smiled. Aha! The girl finally speaks Spanish, Luciana cried, wiping her happy tears. Everyone laughed. Let us leave now, Estella said, taking my hand. Marcos and the driver are waiting downstairs.